Please be seated. Mr. Duckworth. Mr. Duckworth. Would you state your full name for the record, please?
Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth.
And do you wish to affirm or take an oath?
I, Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence I give to this Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit down.
Thank you.
Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Duckworth, were you summoned to appear before the Perth Casino Royal Commission today?
Yes.
And the Commission provided with that summons a list of topics which will be covered during your examination?
Yes.
And the Commission invited you to prepare a written statement in relation to those topics?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of that statement?
I do. Yeah.
And have you read the contents of that statement?
Yes.
And are the contents true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Commissioners, I tender the witness statement of Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth, dated 12 May 2021, which has a number GWC 0003.005.001.
The witness statement of Andrew Martin Edward Duckworth, dated the 12th of May 2021, bearing the document identified GWC.0003.0005.0001, is admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you. Mr. Futrell.
May it please you, Commissioners. Mr. Duckworth, I'd like to take you through some of the topics that you have given evidence on in your statement. I would like to clarify some of the things that you have said, perhaps expand on some of the other things, and particularly interested in addressing the matters referred to in your statement as the risks. I'll come to that in a moment. But before I do that, could I just take you to some of your early paragraphs dealing with your experience?
Yeah.
And in paragraph 5, you've said you don't have any specific or formal qualifications specifically in relation to the regulation of casinos or casino gambling, but you have set out in paragraph 7 some experience that you have said has some relevance to gaming and wagering. So I understand from that you're saying that you have some experience, but it's identified in paragraph 7.
Peripheral experience, yes, when working for a government minister.
Okay, so this is when you worked for the Minister for Racing and Gaming in the late 80s, early 90s?
89 to 90, I think it was, yeah.
Okay, and what was your role in that?
I was really there just to assist him in anything to do with that particular portfolio, to contact people in the department, to obtain briefings, accompany him to meetings with waging and gaming people, and also it included liquor people as well. So it was across the portfolio. It was a sort of, I don't know what you call them now, but just a general advisor, I suppose.
I see. That was. So you familiarised yourself in that role, did you, with the then existing legislation and regulations concerning gaming?
I did my best to, in a fairly short time, to come up to speed, and I learnt more as I went on. Yeah.
Okay, and then in the role you held with the there's a TAB.
Yes.
Again, the early part of the 90s. What was your role there?
Just very briefly, a bit of background. There'd been a change of leadership at the TAB, and it was thought at that time that the culture of the organisation was a bit lacking in some areas, one of which was the way they dealt with their agents and customers and so on. I suppose you could say I was headhunted by the then acting Managing Director, Andrew Secker, who had previously been at Racing and Gaming. Would I come and try, and I think his words were, humanise the way the TAB deals with its people a bit, and develop some sort of a framework for relating to clients and customers. So I was there for, I can't remember, 6 to 9 months. I can't swear the exact time, where I had that sort of brief, and I achieved a few things. I think it was down to me that it became a non-smoker, the TABs became a non-smoking entity, things like that, just to sort of bring the place up to date a bit.
I see. Did the role have anything at all to do with the regulation of betting?
No.
And then you've mentioned another role, which is as executive coordinator with the Western Australian Police Force,
Yeah.
and the implementation of a multi-tier corruption prevention plan.
Yeah.
How is that relevant to the gaming activities?
Well, it isn't directly. It's just that there was an organisation which had been found to be wanting in respect of, to some extent, in regard to the way it conducted itself. There was suspected corruption. They wanted to make sure that they sort of took measures to improve the way they operated, to try and close down a few areas which were risky. So I was engaged to, following the Royal Commission that they had, to, together with various people in the police, put together something that was sort of workable for the police to adopt.
I see. You're referring to the Royal Commission into the police.
Yeah, I think it was 2002, was it 2000, something like that?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've also made mention of a number of boards or other committees you sit on.
Yeah, I sat on, yeah.
Or sat on. Many of them appear to have a focus on substance abuse or some form
Yes,
of drug abuse.
yes.
So, what's your background in that area?
Well, in the mid-80s, I worked in the WA Health Department as a coordinator of drug education programs. And in that capacity, it was actually an era where there was expanded budgets for that sort of thing, federally and state-wise. And I was asked to work with people to bring up a suite of programs to address substance abuse from a preventive standpoint. So as part of it, I guess, I was sitting on some boards or committees like INDRAD services, which were tangential to the agency that I worked with.
So, what is INDRAD services?
I can't remember what it stands for now. It was actually a drug and alcohol research and prevention foundation of some sort.
I see. In those roles, have you had any direct experience or gained experience relating to other forms of addiction?
Well, yes, I guess so. Yeah, there's a link there.
And does that have any relevance to addiction to gambling, for example?
Only that they are both classed as addictions, but in the particular behaviours which relate to each, perhaps not. At a deeper psychological level, I guess they are, yes.
Okay, and at the moment, are you still employed or are you retired? Or
No, I've been retired for quite a while.
And what was during the period that you were a member of the I'm going to call it the GWC,
GWC.
which I hope you know means the Gaming Wagering Commission. While you're a member of that, were you employed as well in some other role?
No.
So your only role was as a member of the GWC at that time?
That's right.
So, and that's for the full period from 2008 to 2020?
Yes.
And so you were effectively retired, were you, in that period otherwise?
Yes.
I see. And at the time of your appointment, were you also retired at that stage, were you?
Yes, when I was appointed. I was approached not long before I retired to ask if I might be interested to serve on it. But by the time I was on the commission, I was retired.
Oh, I see. And where were you working at the time?
I was in the police in the legal services branch, I think it was then.
So how would you describe the various roles, your profession, if you like? What would you describe yourself as?
Well, no, I was going to say jack of all trades in the public service, but I did work in a number of different areas, usually in relation to policy formulation, some research, project management, ranging from prisoner education to health, drug education, the ethics and standards branch in the police, where I designed courses along with a colleague. So I don't know how I'd describe it simply, I suppose, as a public servant who did those things.
All right. Could I ask you just to now refer to paragraph 13 of your statement? And this is I'm dealing now with a period after you had been appointed as a member of the GWC, and you mentioned there you received a bundle of the relevant acts. If I mention a few to you, I hope you'll perhaps be able to remember them, or let me know if you can recall precisely which acts you received. Do you recall if you were provided a copy of the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act?
Yep.
And the Casino Control Act?
Yes.
Were you also provided with the regulations under those acts at the time?
Yes, I think so.
And what about the Casino Burswood Island Agreement Act?
I remember that. Yeah.
You think
I remember the title, and I'm pretty sure I remember it because I would have received it. So I'm slightly less certain about that.
Were you provided with copies of the operations or the casino manuals?
No.
And were you provided with any copies of any directions that had been given to the casino licensee?
No.
Were you provided with any documents or a document that set out or summarised the various functions and powers and obligations of the GWC?
Yes, I think it may have been an extract from an annual report, but there was something on a page which set out that it was responsible for the administration, regulation, gaming, wagering in the state, and so on.
So just a general summary document of those functions? Now, at any time while you were a member of the GWC, were you provided with a document that was titled a charter or something of that effect?
No, not a charter that I recall, no.
Was there something like a charter that was developed during the time you were on were you a member of the GWC?
Not as such, no.
Perhaps if I just describe the contents, and you can let me know if there was some sort of a document or series of documents that may have contained it. Was there any other document or documents of which you're aware that set out the role, composition and processes related to key governance of the GWC?
Only what I saw in the annual report. It was laid out there.
Okay. Were you at any time while you were a member of the GWC provided with something referred to as a risk management policy or something of a similar nature?
No, but I do recall public service documents which mentioned that. There was a general public service publication put out specifically for boards and committees, which talked about generally how you should conduct yourself and the issues, and I think risk management was in there.
Are you referring to a document called Board Essentials by the Public Service Commissioner?
That may be it, yes.
I see. Was there any, during the period you were on the GWC, was there any risk management policy developed specifically for the purposes of the GWC?
For the purpose of the GWC? No.
What about, was there, or perhaps, was there any document dealing with or process that you can recall dealing with audit of the GWC itself?
There was an audit policy, I think, yes. I mean, obviously we were audited like all government departments, or departments and boards, commissions, I suppose. And there were, I think, internal audits on a range of issues.
Are you referring to an internal audit of the GWC?
Well, of the department, and the GWC did have a set of KPIs which were, I guess, audited for annual report purposes.
Who undertook the was there a committee of the GWC delegated the task of audit?
No.
So who was the person, if you like, who undertook the internal audit for GWC?
I don't know who the person was. I think it would have been from the department.
There was someone from the department. And did that person report directly to the GWC on on carrying out the internal audit?
The report came to GWC, but I can't remember whether someone in person came in.
All right. You don't recall if when the audit report or the reporting was done, there was a person from the department available to answer questions at a meeting?
Yes, and there was certainly. Yes, I think it was. I'll qualify that. I think that's the case. I know there was with certainly with budgetary matters. There was financial officers and so forth available to answer questions, and I think that was the case with the audit.
I'd like to come back to the budget process in a moment. And so, is it to the best of your recollection, there was some form of audit report prepared each year and dealt with at a meeting of the GWC?
Yes, well, that's right. There were key performance indicators. So obviously, well, not obviously, but they were checked to see if they had met their targets. So I guess that's an audit, I suppose.
And how were the KPIs set?
There was discussion in the GWC. I recall towards the end of my tenure, there was a feeling that the KPIs should be updated and changed, but they were to do with things like cost per inspection for various issues, for casino, cost per inspection for gaming, cost of providing services for people who were problem gamblers. It was, yeah, that was the sort of thing that the KPIs reflected.
During the period that you were a member of the GWC, do you recall whether there was any occasion when the GWC undertook an analysis of its skills to see if there were any gaps in the membership?
It didn't, no.
And what about, were there any sessions that you can recall, either during meetings or at separate times, when there was a focus on the strategy of the GWC?
Oh, there were questions about strategy, and yeah.
Was there if you like, a documented strategy for the GWC recorded in a resolution of some kind? I'm trying to think what form there was. I mean, there was strategies about various perennial issues that we dealt with. For example, ensuring that gaming, both at the casino and not in the casino, was fair and equitable and according to the rules of play and so on. There was strategies about ensuring, I suppose you could say procedures as much as strategies, for ensuring that key employees and others were correctly licensed and observed the terms of their license. There were strategies about ensuring that the gaming machines were behaving as they should, that they were regularly tested and found to be delivering the correct return to player and other such things. I suppose there's a word thing here. I mean, there's procedures and checks and regulations, and then there's strategies. So the things you're describing, would you put more into the form of a, if you like, procedures and regulations,
Right.
Policy,
Yeah.
perhaps? So what I'm really asking you is if there was an overall consensus between the members of the GWC as to what the policies and procedures, etc., should be directed towards.
Yeah, there was. It was probably an unwritten one, I would say.
Okay.
But again, we were there to ensure that all game was conducted properly, according to the regs, to the law, was fair, and so on. That was, and that we also had a brief to ensure that people who suffered from harm from gambling, that measures were taken to some extent to alleviate that, or to whatever, in whatever way we could.
I think you might have anticipated my next question, which was what was the unwritten strategy? And so is that what you've just described, is the unwritten strategy?
Yeah, and yes, that's right. There'd be a good standard of regulation and administration of these things.
And would you say that when decisions came up for consideration by the GWC, they were measured against the requirements of that strategy you've just described?
It would always be there in the back of people's minds, yes. It would be the measuring stick against which you did things.
Okay, now, do you recall attending a meeting at which, I'm taking it out of, I think it's paragraph 38 of your statement.
Which paragraph?
Paragraph 38.
38.
38. I believe you've been provided with a list of documents that may be the subject of your examination.
Yeah.
Have you had an opportunity to read through them before coming in?
I've been able to look at those documents. I haven't been provided with them. But
Okay, you've looked at them. Yeah. I just want to ask you some questions. Do you recall, having been through those documents now, attending a meeting at which the GWC approved a code of conduct?
Vaguely, yes. I say vaguely because I also had a general public service code of conduct, if you like. And I know that the GWC did develop its own, for sure, yeah. But
I think you also say you have a fair idea yourself of what
yes,
is involved in conflict of interest.
Absolutely, and I think most people there would have done. They were all reasonable professional people. They'd worked in a number of spheres. Conflict of interest was something that I think everybody would have had in mind in whatever they did. Only on a couple of occasions someone would say, well, by the way, that person who's coming in next, I happen to know because, 10 years ago we worked together or whatever. So people were pretty good on that. Also, conflict of interest was, I think, second or third item on the agenda at each meeting, which gave a formal opportunity for people to declare such a conflict.
Okay. Now, during your time as a member of the GWC, was that opportunity taken to your recollection? People declared interests?
On a couple of occasions, yes.
And do you recall the occasions now?
Conflict of interest. Yes, a member did say, as I said, that someone who was coming into the meeting with a request for a permit for gaming or something or other was known to that person and hadn't seen the person for years, but, just needed to let it be known.
So you're able to put an approximate date on when this was?
That was actually only in the last few years, I would say 2016, something like that. I think there were others, I'm just trying to recall them. Very few. That was different. There was the casino management invited the GWC as a whole to the opening of their new hotel. So myself and at least one other person, and then said, look, we'll declare the evening at the hotel as a gift, if you like. So that was recorded, and I think the remark at the time was, well, if you like, but it's sort of not really a gift. But
did you actually stay at the hotel that evening? Or?
No. It was there for declaring the new hotel open, and there's a few drinks and so forth. So, in essence, the word goods given, if you like, had a drink.
I see. That particular one, is that the one you're referring to earlier, or was it a different?
No, the one earlier was different. Another member knew a gentleman who was coming in to ask for a gaming permit to be granted somewhere. And the member said, just to let you know, the person who's coming next is someone I worked with X years ago.
I see. Is that a game? That's not a casino-related gaming permit?
No. It was, these two had cross paths in other
I see.
things.
Now, what was the practice after a person had declared a conflict of interest in respect of a particular item of business?
Well, it would be minuted and noted.
And was there any, at the time you remember, was there any other document, say for example, where they were collated and recorded permanently in a register?
No, I don't know about that far, but they would all be minuted individually on whatever meeting one was declared, I suppose.
Okay, now, during the period that you remember of the GWC, Mr Connolly was the Deputy Director of the Department and the Chief Casino Officer.
Yes.
And he was also occupied the position of Deputy Chair of the GWC.
Yes.
Now, if Mr Connolly had an actual or potential conflict of interest regarding an item of business at a meeting of the GWC he attended, would you have expected that he would have declared that conflict to the membership?
Yes, I would, yeah.
Now, if he had an actual or potential conflict of interest regarding the performance of his role as the Chief Casino Officer, would you have expected that he would have declared that actual potential conflict to the membership of the GWC itself?
I would.
Now, at any time in the period during which you were a member of the GWC, do you recall if Mr Connolly made a declaration of conflict of interest as a member of to the members of the GWC?
I don't, no, not while I was a member.
Do you recall if he made a declaration of a conflict of interest as Chief Casino Officer?
No.
You say you don't recall. You positive
No.
recollection he did not.
I'm positive that I didn't hear such a declaration, yeah.
All right. Now, can I take you back to paragraph 13 of your statement?
Yeah.
And I think we went through the bundle of acts that you were provided. Now, did you familiarise yourself with those acts at the time?
I attempted to read through them. I looked at, I skimmed through and looked at parts I thought were most relevant. I then made a decision that I would use them more as reference material than as something that I would sort of read from start to finish.
All right. Well, from your reading of the materials, and I assume from attending meetings and conducting the affairs of the GWC, was it your understanding that one of the powers of the GWC under the Casino Control Act was to carry out certain inspections and audits of and other investigations of the casino licensee?
Yes.
And was it your understanding that the department employed inspectors or other officers to carry out the inspections, audits and other investigations?
Yes.
Now, I'll ask you to look at now at paragraph 34 of your statement. And you've set out there a number of ways in which you've described the department as providing the GWC with support.
Yes.
And I just, to clarify, that's capturing the topic I've just discussed, that where inspectors were carrying out inspections, audits, and other investigations.
Correct, yeah.
In addition to those activities, was your understanding the department also provided employees to provide other services to the GWC of a more administrative nature? Was it your understanding that the department also provided the services of other employees to carry out other functions such as administrative.
Yes, they provide, well, sort of secretariat functions, of course, the keeping of records, keeping of minutes, sending stuff out to the members. Is that sorry? What you
Yes,
mean?
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I may have confused. Like I'm talking about 33 and 34 of your statement together, where you've mentioned in 33 that the
Right.
GWC doesn't have its own staff.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, in addition to the government inspectors, was it your understanding that one of the powers of the GWC under the Casino Control Act was a power to authorise the games played at the Perth Casino?
Yes,
And it was one of the roles that the GWC performed was to review and authorise games.
yes.
Was it also your understanding that one of the powers of the GWC under the Casino Control Act was to give certain directions to the casino licensee?
Yes, they could give directions, yes.
And again, was it your understanding that before a direction was given, it would come to the GWC for consideration and approval before the direction was made?
Yes.
Could I just refer you back to paragraph 33 of your statement and the provision of the services by the department.
Yeah.
Now, what is your understanding of how those services were paid for?
I'm not entirely sure, but I think they were penciled in against the Commission's, or allocated against the Commission's budget, which was derived from licence fees and so forth, or a portion of them at least, because some of these people would only devote part of their working role to the servicing of the GWC.
All right, so was it your understanding the direct employment cost was borne by the department?
Sorry?
The direct cost of employing the various people was borne by the department?
Yes, but as I say, I think perhaps I may be wrong here, but I had the understanding that in respect of the performance of duties on behalf of the GWC, some allocation from the GWC budget may have been made against that.
Okay. Now, do you know how those? Do you recall how those charges were allocated or determined?
No, I don't.
All right. What is your understanding of the sources of funding that were available to the GWC? And here I'm specifically talking about for administering its functions under the Casino Control Act.
As I say, revenue from fees and licences coming from persons and organisations in the gaming area. But I'm pretty sure there are also some direct allocations from Treasury as well.
You mean appropriations from the Parliament?
Appropriations, yeah, from the department, yeah.
And are you suggesting they were appropriated directly for the purposes of the GWC and not the department?
I believe so.
What was your understanding of the purposes for which funds derived, and here again I'm talking about the casino only, funds derived from the casino gaming licence fees could be used?
Sorry, what was that?
What was your understanding of the purpose for which the casino licence fees could be used by the GWC?
My only understanding would be that it could be used generally by the DWC in performance of its functions.
All functions of the GWC? It was available for use in all activities?
I think so.
All right, can I just, to take you, to put the budget some questions about the budget into a framework, it might assist to actually show you, this is really for the purposes only of asking you some questions about the general process, but it might be easier if I show you one example. So if I could call up GWC.0002.0016 .0228, page 0212. Put the document in front of you. It should be a agenda item 11.3 for the GWC budget for the year 2018-2019.
16th of March 2018. Yeah, I see that.
Okay, now if I could ask that someone scroll you down to the heading Recoup to DLGSC. And just beneath that is another heading, Casino Gaming Licence Fee.
You know, gaming license. Yeah.
You see they're about the middle of the page.
Yes, I see that.
And there's an amount, there's a couple of amounts there. Now I'll just ask you to scroll forward again, or if someone could scroll forward, sorry, to page 0217. And you should pick up under the heading Operating Expenses, I think it's the fifth line item, services provided by DLGSC, and there's the same amount that was referred to on the earlier page. And again, under revenues from services, there's a line item for casino gaming licence fees. Again, it's the same amount.
Casino gaming license fees, yeah.
I just to put those features of these documents in your head for the moment, so I can ask you some questions about the general process. Now, I think you mentioned earlier something about charges from the department. Would it be fair to say that the item under the heading Recoup to DLGSC is of that character?
Sorry, recoup from, where are we? Sorry, what am I looking at here?
Sorry, back to page. My apologies. I'm jumping around. I'm not telling everyone else where I'm going. It's 0213. The heading Recoup.
Recoup to do. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Now, is that you mentioned earlier there was an allocation. Is that the allocation, or is it an allocation of that character you were referring to?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Recoup rate is increased from... I think so, yes.
All right. Now, I think you mentioned earlier you weren't clear on how the recoupment was, or the allocation was determined.
The recoupment, yes.
Yes. Now, this each year there was a budget prepared for the GWC.
Mm-hmm.
It was prepared by a member of, or a person within the department. And in this case, it's the CFO.
Yeah.
And would it be fair to say that was a CFO each year?
Yes.
And at the meetings held each year when the budget was just dealt with, was the CFO present?
Generally, yes. I mean, there may have been one or two occasions when not, but certainly always available and generally present, I think.
And to the best of your recollection, was there any discussion at the meetings dealing with the budget of the items in the budget and the way in which they had been determined?
There was discussion, yes.
Can you recall any specific discussion about determining the allocation of costs by the department to GWC for services provided?
Only in general terms. It was a topic for discussion, but I can't recall what sort of arguments were put to and fro on that.
Okay.
But it was discussed, yeah.
Now, in your, or perhaps before we move to paragraph 16 of your statement, there also each meeting, each monthly meeting, there were reports on the financial statements of
Yes, there were.
the GWC, and this wasn't referred to on the list of documents, but it's just, if I could just take you to the preceding agenda item in this paper, which is at page 0206. As an example of an agenda paper where the financial statements were presented. Again, now, is it your recollection that at each GWC meeting a person from the department responsible for accounts in some way would be present to present this paper?
Not at each WC meeting, but at where it was a case of the budget. They were either available or were called in.
So budget is different to just the general watching
Yeah,
financial
the
statements?
CFO didn't come to GWC meetings, no.
Did an accountant from the department attend any, for the purpose of answering questions on the financial statements?
Over the years, I think so, but of course in latter years when I was there, the GWC itself contained two accountants who...
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, actually. So
Yeah.
that's in paragraph 16 of your statement. You've mentioned that there was some accountants appointed to the membership, I think you said, in the latter years. So which members were they?
There's Carmelina Fiorentino and Jodie Heed was her name then, but I think it's Jodie Meadows, is it now?
Okay, and you've said there in your statement that they took it upon themselves to look more closely at accounting matters, as you might imagine accountants would.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by look more closely at accounting matters?
Well, it was, to be honest, I have no accounting background. I find accounting quite difficult, but they would say, look, line 3, why is this under recurrent account rather than something account, or that figure more correctly should be in this column rather than that one. Now that was beyond my own ability to discover, shall we say, but those are the sort of technical accounting questions which they began to ask.
And were those questions directed to the CFO at a meeting dealing with the budget, or in general meetings dealing with accounts?
It was really just a general question which was opened, through the chair, but not even particularly to the chair. One of them might say, well, hang on, why is this figure in that column rather than that one? Or they don't add up correctly, or whatever it was. And then there'd be some general discussion about that. If there's a problem and there was no departmental accounting person there, it would be referred off to be looked at and the response to be given at the next meeting.
Okay, so if the question, it was a question directed to the chair, or presumably the chair would either be the Director General of the department or the Deputy Director General.
Yes, that's right.
So someone from the department.
Yeah.
And if that person didn't know the answer to the question, then you would be referred to...
That's right. The decision was, okay, well, it'll be referred to the CFO or Deputy CFO or whatever, and we'll have an answer at the next meeting.
Okay, I see. All right. Now, in paragraph 30 of your statement, you have... is dealing with a different under a different heading, but I want to ask you some questions about this. So I want to deal with the topic of risk more generally in a moment, but in paragraph 30 you have said two things. I just want to understand what you mean by them. You've indicated that the GWC did not have the capability to investigate or detect money laundering or infiltration of criminals into the casino operation. So capability is one idea there, and the other is you're also saying that the GWC didn't have the means to do those things.
Mm.
Do I understand by capability you are meaning it didn't have within it the expertise, anyone who could undertake those kinds of tasks?
Yes.
And do I understand by means you mean didn't have the financial ability to fund it?
Partly that, or the sort of requisite networks of people who are have expertise in these areas. I mean, we weren't officially linked to people like AFP, Interpol, those sort of people whose business is to look at these sort of matters. So we had neither the capability in terms of background or the linkages or networks to carry out that sort of operation.
I see. Now you're expressing that obviously at the time your statement was prepared.
Mm.
Were those explanations provided at any time during your tenure as a member of the GWC?
Well, the example that I draw from was when which I'm sure you want to ask me about, but the decision was made to abandon the idea that the GWC could, with any real prospect, examine the credentials, background, criminal background accounts of people who might appear in junkets, and by association money laundering. And there's discussion there that, look, it says under the Act that we are responsible for that area, but quite honestly, we've tried and failed. The police are either unable or perhaps unwilling, I don't know, to pursue these sort of matters. Interpol have been, according to what was said, have been contacted and said, no, we're not going to do that for you. So the conclusion was drawn that though this this important power was conferred on the Commission under the Act, in actual practical terms, there was little the Commission itself could do to find, detect, investigate these sort of matters.
Okay, I do want to ask you in more detail
Sure,
about that particular event, but
Yeah.
just with respect to the answer you've just given, there are two things. One is the capability, which
Yeah.
have you got the people who can do this, and the other is whether you have the money to do it.
Yeah. No, didn't have the money to do it.
You can solve the first with the money.
Mm.
So what I'm asking is, was any consideration given to budgeting for developing the capability?
No, it wasn't. No.
Now, I'm now talking about at any time during the period you were on the GWC, not just in 2010.
Right.
So is that statement true of the entire period that you were on the GWC?
It would have been. There was this belief amongst members that the federal bodies of Austrac, AFP, possibly the ATO, together with state police, were the people who had the responsibility for and the brief of finding out whether known criminals or organised criminals were entering the country. Certainly with Austrac, they had links to all financial organisations under the the Financial Transaction Reporting Act that put the onus actually on the financial institution to tell them if there's any suspect accounts or indeed any account, I think, over $10,000 or $10,000 and over. So we're aware that there were some structures there, and I suppose with hindsight should have been surer about this, but believed that these organisations were equipped to detect these sort of people and organisations.
Okay, so I think you're expanding on what you've said in paragraph 31 of your statement here.
Yep.
I do want to ask you about that. So I think, again, there are two different ideas, if I could say, in your answer. One is the money laundering or AML aspect, which is the AUSTRAC matter, and the other is junket operators, which was the subject of the earlier decision. But you've said, and I do want to ask you about this, you said in the last sentence of that paragraph, I had the impression that the federal authorities had fairly strict and rigorous systems for vetting people who organised junkets, we're dealing with junkets here, and the people who visited casinos as part of junkets. So where did you gain that impression from?
I took it on myself to sort of find out a bit more about AUSTRAC, mainly through looking online to see what their sort of mission statement and modus operandi was. And it seemed to me that they had taken on this responsibility.
So
talking about money laundering, or
no, I'm talking about junket.
Oh,
here.
right,
so
sorry.
I think that sentence is directly referring to junkets.
yeah.
So I'm wondering where you gained that impression from concerning junkets.
No, I was sorry, my mistake. I was talking more about money laundering there. With respect to junkets, it just seemed that there was still the what was customs and now border force people who have some responsibility in vetting who comes into the country in terms of their criminal record and so forth. So it was really just a belief that they, possibly the federal police, would have an eye on these people and alert other organisations of their presence.
But where did the belief come from? That's what I'm asking you. How did you form that belief that the federal authorities were addressing or vetting people coming into the country who might be undesirable junket operators?
Well, I think I can recall it arose partly from a general discussion at one meeting. Well, you know, who's looking at these areas, and you know, the AFP and the customs people were mentioned. Beyond that, I suppose I just I didn't have any other real sources of information other than what I sort of looked up online.
Was any consideration given to, if you like, undertaking some form of analysis of what measures precisely the federal authorities were taking to identify people coming into the country with criminal histories?
No, it wasn't, no.
Now, with respect to the AUSTRAC aspect, again, what was the source of your understanding of how AUSTRAC would effectively address the risk of money laundering? And I'm talking now about specifically the Perth casino.
Perth casino. Well, the first thing was that the casino was obliged to inform AUSTRAC if it suspected any of the accounts that it was dealing with, or that there were sums of $10,000 and more being transacted. I think, as I say, that was part of that federal act, which applied to banks, casinos, and so on. So the casino had to have that protocol in place. And I would have thought that AUSTRAC would be in communication with the casino from time to time anyway, to sort of check their protocols and so on.
So, again, was there any specific, if you like, paper prepared or study undertaken to your recollection that dealt with an analysis of this is what their requirements are, the Perth Casino under the AUSTRAC legislation. These are the risks associated with money laundering in the Perth Casino. The two, there's an overlap. It's covered, in other words. Any analysis of that character?
There wasn't a formal paper to that effect, no.
And so what was it that satisfied you at least that AUSTRAC was enough to deal with that risk?
I'm talking about the benefit of hindsight now, I suppose, but at the time I felt quite sure that it seemed to be an organisation which was very much dedicated to this whole financial crime area. And I probably had more faith in it than I should, but yeah, and I didn't really see anything beyond that.
Okay, now can I just turn to a slightly different topic? It's you refer in paragraph 27 of your statement to a casino manual.
Excuse me.
And then in the next paragraph, I think you may have already alluded to this in one of your answers to one of my earlier questions, which deals with policies of the GWC concerning various things.
Yeah.
And then in paragraph 29, you say, beyond this point, to the best of my recollection, GWC did not have specific policies dealing with the various risks you've then identified. My question is really one of clarification. Where you use the expression beyond this, are you intending to suggest that the policies referred, either the casino manual itself or the policies referred to in paragraph 28, in some way covered those risks you have identified?
Well, the casino manual was certainly intended to cover any operational risks.
And is it your understanding of the casino manual that it would cover operational risks dealing with, and I want to focus here specifically on junket operations and money laundering?
Well, as I say, it was required to be part of the protocol that would declare any suspicious transactions, yeah.
But on leaving to one side AUSTRAC,
Yeah.
obligations under AUSTRAC, I'm now specifically dealing with your understanding of the casino manual itself.
Mm-hmm.
Was it your understanding that there was a requirement under the casino manual that would address in some way junket operators to vet them for their, if you like, probity of the operator, and secondly, for money laundering to ensure there was processes that address the risk of money laundering in the Perth casino?
Yes, I thought they would have those processes.
When you say you thought they would, that's a conditional expression. Are you saying you had a positive understanding at the time you remember the GWC that they covered those things? Or is it you're speculating as to it?
I was probably speculating.
Now or then?
Well, I'm certainly speculating now, but I had the strong impression they had to record the names and whatever background information they could get about all junket participants. And in fact, I think they relied partly on the junket operators to supply these. So I understood there would be like a register of people who had attended junkets.
And was it your understanding that the register would be provided to the GWC from time to time?
On request, it would, yeah.
On request. So it wasn't something that they were required to provide, on your understanding, to the GWC regularly?
No.
And to your knowledge or understanding, were there any occasions when it was requested by someone on behalf of the GWC for scrutiny?
No.
So it wasn't something that you can recall being addressed in a report to the GWC at one of its monthly meetings?
I don't recall that. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I don't recall that.
Can I ask you just again to go back to your statement, this time at paragraph 32. There's something in this paragraph I don't quite follow. Just need some clarification. You have indicated that in that paragraph that your understanding that the GWC had responsibility for overseeing the renewal of the Perth Casino's licence every 3 to 5 years and ensuring that money laundering prevention and protocols reporting form part of the casino's risk management plan.
Yeah.
Where have you gained that understanding from?
Well, I knew that the casino licence had to be renewed. The reason I put every 3 or 5, I couldn't remember which. It comes up for renewal, and that as part of that renewal, it would have to show that it had the necessary sort of protocols in place.
Okay, so just to be clear, are you referring now to the licence of the Perth Casino itself, or the licences of the employees who carry out activities at the casino?
Casino itself.
So it's your understanding there was a process by which it would be renewed every 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
And who undertook the process of that renewal?
Well, it would be under the auspices of the GWC and the departmental people who carried out the regulatory inspections. People would and all the aspects of the casino's operations would do the due diligence or checking.
Can you recall an occasion upon which a renewal application came before the GWC while you were a member?
I have an impression just before my term finished, it's the licence is up for renewal.
The Perth Casino licence?
Yeah, I think so.
And what was the outcome of that process, your recollection?
I'm trying to remember whether it was just not long before I left and I didn't know the outcome, or whether, let's think. I'm sorry, my memory's not good there. I think it may well have been granted.
Okay. Now, can I just you have mentioned this, we have dealt with this a little earlier in passing, but I want to come back to it and make sure I have a clear understanding of your evidence on this. What do you understand the role or function of the GWC to be with respect to the risk of illegal activity taking place in connection with the Perth Casino? And I'm using that broadly, illegal activity, to cover junkets, money laundering, prostitution, or any other form of illegal activity.
Well, the GWC has a statutory obligation, I think, in Casino Control Act to prevent money laundering and to oversee the operation of junkets. That's what it says in the Act.
And would it be fair to say from the answers you've given earlier, you considered that role or that part of the role was being fulfilled by virtue of federal authorities addressing those two risks in other legislation?
Yes, in that there was this lack of capability of the GWC to do it.
Okay. Now, do you consider that it would be appropriate for the GWC to take a more active role in regulating or managing the risk of that illegal activity at the Perth casino?
Yes.
And do you consider it would be appropriate for there to be funding made available to permit that to take place?
Thinking in today's terms, yes.
When you say thinking in today's terms, are you meaning with the benefit of hindsight
Yes.
and knowing what you know from the Bergen inquiry?
Yes.
All right. Now, could I ask you to consider, you mentioned this earlier, I do want to come back to this, the point at which the casino regulations were changed to remove the requirement to approve junkets.
Yeah.
And it may be that some of the answers you were giving in the general or in the broad were of your understanding, sorry, my camera's covered, were picked up from the paper that was presented at the meeting. So if I could just ask you, if I could call up on this document, by the way, is subject of a non-publication, either order, ruling or pending ruling. It's GWC .0002.0016.001. And if I could ask first that you navigate to page 0337. I have a couple of questions about this. Now, have you had an opportunity to reread this paper before you attended today?
Let's have a look. Which one is this?
You should have a paper, agenda item 8.2, dated 11 February 2020.
2010, is it?
Sorry, 2010.
Yeah.
My apologies.
I think I've seen it, yes.
Okay, now just, have you got a paper copy? I think this will be easier, Mr. Duckworth, for you just to...
Thank you.
The front page of your paper copy will be the agenda to the meeting, and it's just got the relevant paper.
Yeah.
If I just ask you to read through it, you'll see that it describes an application by the casino licensee, and reasons given, and their reasons are consistent with, I think, largely what you've said about your understanding of the coverage of entry into the country by people who are probity risk and the requirements to report under the AML legislation.
Yeah.
So it possibly is one of the sources of your understanding.
Yes.
But if I could ask you to focus on the conclusion.
Conclusion.
There's two paragraphs under the heading conclusion.
So, where are
So it's on page, in the top right-hand
Oh,
corner,
yes,
it'll have a little underscore 0346.
where there's a signature at the bottom in time.
Correct, yes, correct.
Conclusion, right? Yeah, that's where I got my information from, if you like.
Yes, and I'm just, there are some additional things in that paragraph that I want to draw to your attention. One is the reference to, in addition, under section 26(2) of the Casino Control Act, the police have authority to prohibit individuals from entering and remaining in licensed casinos.
Police have the authority. Yeah.
And a little further down, there's reference to the power under the Act to promulgate regulations under Section 25, capital A, to require the casino licensee to provide specific information concerning junket activity.
Yeah.
And then, an alternatively, the Commission can issue directions in the casino concerning junket activity. So, under the conclusion, there appear to be a number of ideas. One is we don't need it because we've got these other controls. But in any event, there are these additional, if you like, levers available to us.
Yeah.
Then, under the heading recommendation, it refers to remove the requirement for junket operator representative to be approved by the Commission.
Yeah.
So, in other words, removing the approval process. I have a couple of questions in relation to your understanding then of what was being suggested. The first is, was it your understanding that the regulations concerning junkets would be deleted in their entirety, or only that part that dealt with approvals of junket operators and representatives?
I guess my impression, and I'm struggling to remember in any detail, was that these approvals or the requirement for that they wouldn't come to the Commission, that the Commission wouldn't deal with those, but they would still be being dealt with, if you like.
So there would be your understanding was there would be a process in place for approving junket operators?
No, that's not right. No, there would be a process in place for vetting junket operators, which would be carried out by other authorities, and that consequently there wouldn't be any, unless the GWC were contacted, there would be no need to bring these processes to the GWC to approval, but they would still be being vetted.
All right. What I trying to ask you really the question is about is whether it was your understanding that all of the regulations dealing with junkets would be removed in their entirety, or just that part of them that dealt with the process by which the GWC was to approve junket operators and representatives?
Well, my understanding at the time was the latter. That just the part that
dealt with approvals.
That was my understanding at the time.
Now, at the time, did you understand there would be any residual regulation of junkets after the removal of the requirement to approve junket operators and representatives? In other words, there would still be some framework for regulating junkets. It just wasn't going to be the responsibility of the GWC to approve the operators and representatives.
Broadly, yes.
And where did that understanding come from?
Well, I didn't think otherwise. The argument had been that the GWC couldn't successfully vet junket operators or have the resources to chase up who they were, where they come from, and so on. And that therefore, providing the federal authorities were doing that, the risk was being taken care of, and that there would be no further need to bring final approval processes to the GWC.
All right. During the period that you were a member of the GWC, do you recall any occasions upon which you became aware of the police exercising any power to prohibit a person from entering the Perth casino premises?
No, I don't.
And during the period that you were on the GWC, do you recall there any specific directions that you can recall being given to the casino licensee dealing with matters relating to either junkets or money laundering?
Sorry, what was that? Any
specific directions being given by the GWC to the casino licensee that address junkets?
No, not a direction, no.
Or that addressed AML money laundering aspects?
No.
I've got a question for you again to really ask you this question. I need you to look at a document. So if I could ask that we call up GWC.0002. Sorry, I've got the wrong one. My apologies. Need to move quickly. So where do we get to? 0002.0016.0006 at page 0419. And this is I'm going to sort of segue to a slightly different topic, but before I do, I want to draw your attention to this because it deals with the remaining, or it deals with how the GWC dealt with some delegations that had been made prior to the changes to the regulations.
Right.
Again, I think you've been provided with a copy of this meeting paper. And if I could just ask that you, if I draw, perhaps we've got a paper copy again, this one. Again, I think this is going to be easier for you. That's incomplete, but anyway, we need to get the whole thing up. Yeah, I'll give you a copy of the first few pages.
Right.
Just want to draw your attention to the number 2 under the recommendation. Which is on the first page of the agenda paper. And then if I just, again, draw your attention to the page 0420, and there's a bullet point headed Junket Approvals, which summarises the effect of the decision made in February of 2010, the effect of the amendments to the regulations, which are attached to this agenda paper, and then it addresses, and this you won't have, so maybe you could put this up on the overhead projector, please. Showing my age by calling it that, the screen. 0422. And sorry, next page. Where are we? Here we go. Sorry, I've got the wrong page reference. It's 0428. So you can see if that page comes up, there's a deletion of a power in accordance with the bottom of the page, the regulation to provisionally approve junket operators and various other things. So it reflects the if you like, removal of that power of approval in the regulations. So the question I have for you now is whether your whether you understood, following the amendments to the regulations in June 2010 and the changes to the delegations that were undertaken at the same time, whether you understood at that time or believed there to be any remaining powers of the GWC with respect to regulation of junkets.
Effectively not.
All right. To your knowledge, were there any aspects of the inspection and audit regime undertaken by the government inspectors that dealt with the use of bank accounts and identification of any entries that might reflect money laundering activity?
No, they tended to concentrate on the conduct on the floor by and large, and cash counts, that sort of thing.
Okay, could I... Now, on this topic of... I probably should have asked you before taking to the delegations. You understood that one of the powers that the GWC was able to exercise was a power to delegate its powers to
Yes.
either positions or individuals.
Yeah.
Now, if we could call up, please, GWC 0002.0016.008 to... Sorry, I've got the wrong one again. My apologies. Last digit's not 82, but 0056 at page 0349. We've got a hard copy of this one. Again, I'm going to hand you a hard copy of this.
Okay.
This will make it much easier for you.
Thank you.
Now, again, if you had an opportunity to have a read of this before today, to refresh your memory about this agenda paper.
I have glanced this one, yeah.
Okay, so if I want to draw your attention to some aspects of it, and I want to ask you a question again, as I have been, about your understanding of its effect. So this, there's a recommendation on the first page of concerning the delegation of powers in accordance with Section 16 of the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act.
Mm.
And then I'm focusing here on the sub A, which is dealing with the Casino Control Officer.
Yep.
And there's a number of powers that are delegated, including to declare an authorised game, one of the powers of the Commission, the GWC, to approve amendment to rules, again one of the powers of the GWC, and to issue a direction under Section 24 of the Casino Control Act, again it's a power of the GWC. So there's a reference to each of those and a proposal and a rationale for why it was considered necessary at this time to delegate those powers to the Chief Casino Officer. On pages 0353 and 0354, there are two flow diagrams that contrast what was then the existing process and what was the proposed process following approval of this delegation. Now, what transpired is this delegation was in fact, well, the minutes record the recommendation was accepted. What I would like to ask you is what your understanding was of the process that was intended to be followed under that power of delegation.
Can I just have a moment?
Yes, certainly. It isn't the most clear diagram.
Well,
I have some questions.
They never are, but anyway. Okay.
Okay, so this is probably going to be a mixture, and answering this question will be a mixture of your understanding, having reread it, but also of the processes that the GWC actually followed. So, is it the case that it was your understanding, and I suppose was this the procedure followed, that when the casino licensee lodged a submission either for approval of a new game or variation to an existing game, or a submission requiring an amendment to the casino manual, it was to be reviewed and considered by the GWC, and then, if approved, in principle, the documentation in connection with that, how you would implement the decision, would be left to the Chief Casino Officer under the power of delegation.
Yep. Certainly all proposed changes to games, any requests of that sort, any new games, are always brought to the Commission, and there's discussion about them. With the latter part of what you said, the Commission agreed on a certain decision or course of action. It might be, yes, we approve that with the proviso that there be a report in 6 months on this or that aspect of the game or whatever. And it would be made clear what was to go into that document. And the document, if not before, would be recorded at the next meeting, or members would be able to see it.
So to summarise what you said, I think, is in the case of new games at least, there would be a process by which it would come to the GWC for approval. Having received approval with or without conditions, the implementation, as in the writing up of the specific change to the rules or whatever was required, would be done by under the supervision of the CCO.
Delegated off to a departmental officer to complete.
And then that process could be completed by the Chief Casino Officer under the power of delegation and reported back at the next meeting to the GWC saying, essentially, this has been done in accordance with your approval.
That's generally it, yeah.
Okay, now that's the case in respect of amendments to, or new games, changes to games. What about operational matters, the casino manual, the operations aspects.
Like inspections and so
The
forth.
way the manual was to be yes, the way that in which the casino was to operate under the casino manual operations.
Well, that would also come to meetings and be discussed, yeah.
So if there was to be an amendment to that particular document, you would come to a meeting first, this is your understanding,
Yes, that's my understanding.
and then there was some discussion about it, and whatever's resolved at the meeting would then be implemented by the chief casino officer
Yeah,
under the power of delegation.
yes, generally, yeah.
Okay, now that was the position. Is that your understanding as of this delegation in April 2012? Or did it? What you're describing, is that the process for the entire period that you were a member of the GWC?
I think so, yes. I mean, everything to do, every new proposed operation, game, use of floor space, leasing out of commercial properties, everything, or reconfiguring gaming rooms, everything came to the GWC.
Were there some things that didn't know? Is it under powers delegations, for instance, licensing?
Sorry, I was
employees?
going to say I wouldn't know because if they didn't, I don't know. There may be, there aren't things that I didn't know about, put it that way.
Beg your pardon? Did you say there were things you didn't know about?
Well, I only knew about the things that came to the meeting. So I'm presuming that everything that should have arrived at the meeting for discussion, approval, amendment, whatever, would have come. Yeah.
There was a regular item on the meeting agendas in your time for powers that have been exercised under delegation, though, was there not?
Yes.
And
Yes.
presumably you reviewed that to see what powers had been
Yes.
exercised?
Yeah.
And if you had any questions about those, would you, or did you ask about them?
From time to time, people asked, yes. Yeah.
And if there was any, I'll withdraw that. So that procedure that I've just walked through, was that the procedure that you understood to be in place for the duration of the period you were on the GWC, at least from April 2012?
Yes, I mean, like you say, these diagrams aren't easy at a glance to look at, but the general process of bringing a matter before the Commission, discussion, rejection, acceptance, amendment, and so on, and then after those delegations were put in place, that the Chief Casino Officer or other designated person could ensure that it happened. And I suppose, just as an aside, people took it as just a common practice in any sort of management that a certain amount of delegation was efficient and was a good thing.
Were there occasions when you can recall any occasion when the power was exercised without prior approval?
No, there were a couple of occasions which were reported back to the meeting where some decision was taken because of a time constraint or something that came up suddenly. I can't give you any examples, unfortunately, but I do remember Mr. Sargent saying, look, this came up, I felt that I had to make a decision. This is a decision I made. Are there any objections to that? And I cannot remember what it was about. Nothing, huge. But
I see. So an example you're giving is where power has been exercised without prior authority, but then effectively ratified after the event?
yes, very rare, but
Okay,
I can remember one occasion. I can't remember what it was.
And the example you've given is that of Mr. Sargent, though. This is not, he obviously wasn't the chief casino officer. So I was asking you specifically
All
about
right, sorry
the
about
chief
that.
casino
Yeah,
officer.
Yeah, no.
Any examples that you can recall where the chief casino officer exercised a power and then came back to sort ratification after the event?
I think there were a couple of occasions, and again, they seem to be of a relatively minor nature. Sort of a rule in a game which had previously been discussed, but
And there were where the time was of the essence, those kinds of matters.
that's what, yes, yeah.
All right, well, you mentioned Mr. Sargent, and I'm assuming from that you understood that he also held the position of Director General held a power of delegation as well?
Yes, I mean, he was mainly the Chief Casino Officer and the DDG, but as Chair, Mr. Sargent was Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry, as Chair.
As
So,
Chair, yeah.
Well, if we could call up, again, I'll hand you a copy of this one, GC 0002-0016.0082.
Thank you.
And while I'm there, can we have I think this has got a signed delegation, this one, which is 0007.00183. I want to put the 2 up if you can. Get a paper copy. Is it colour? Good.
Thank you.
Now, perhaps I could ask you, that last document I handed to you, which is the one ending 0183_0001.
Yeah.
Is your signature, do you recognise your signature there at all under the
On the third line, my signature, yeah.
third line?
Mm.
Right. Now, again, did you have a chance to read the agenda paper before coming in today?
I've seen a lot of papers, and this would have been one of them, I think.
Yes, I'll allow you to have the opportunity to read it if you reread it if you wish to. Again, the question I'm going to ask you is of a more general character, but really, you can answer either before or after rereading it as you wish. But what I would really like to know is what your understanding was of the way in which this power was to be exercised by the chair, and in this case also the deputy chair received the same delegation.
Predominantly, it was in relation to matters of detail or finalising matters that had been discussed and ensuring that they were implemented. There was a general understanding, I believe, that anything of real weight or import in a policy or strategic matter would need the full imprint of the GWC rather than be delegated. This was often on, as I say, on a matter of things to do with games or finalising a new procedure for transporting money from tables to somewhere. Once it had been discussed, and ensuring that the nuts and bolts of that sort of thing were then implemented.
Okay, so that's your understanding of how the power was to be exercised.
Yeah,
the reason I'm asking the question is because if you look at the delegation itself, in its terms, it is quite a lot wider than what you've described, or at least arguably wider. it just appears on its face to delegate all of the powers of the Commission, the GWC Commission that is, except for the power of delegation itself, which would, in theory, give enormous power to the holder of the delegation.
Yes.
So, and the minutes, if I could call those up, which is GWC 0.0016.0016.0102 at page 0009.
Where are we?
It's the resolution itself of the committee, the GWC.
Where are we looking at? 8.2?
8.2, yes.
Okay.
So the question I've got for you really is this. So the delegations are to a position, the chair and the deputy chair, so people can come and go from those positions. Where, if at all, to your knowledge, was the limitation recorded on the ability to exercise the power? In other words, you've described a general understanding, but where was that understanding recorded?
I'm not quite sure what's...
Or was it recorded, or was it just an understanding?
I guess it was an understanding that these powers would be used wisely. It was a bit of a catch-all, but given the sort of relationships on the GWC, which were quite professional and cordial and so on, there was certainly no idea that these powers wouldn't be used improperly, wouldn't be used other than properly.
I understand that. So you were placing your faith, if you like, in the integrity of the office holder for the time being.
I guess so, yes.
And that they would not exercise the power for a purpose which you considered had not been given.
Correct.
And you mentioned an example where I think you said Mr. Sargent had exercised the power and then come back to the committee, the GWC. Is that an example of what you would describe as exercising the power properly or for the purpose which you'd been given?
From memory, yes. It was something fairly minor, but it needed expediting for some reason.
I see. And can you provide any other examples of the exercise of the use of the delegation in the way that you have described that satisfied you it was being used appropriately?
Well, I could frame it the other way. I can't remember any that I thought were being used inappropriately, but my memory precludes me from pinning down any particular action.
All right. So was it your expectation that if it were exercised, the GWC would be informed after the exercise of that power?
Yes. By
the chair, if it was the chair?
Yes, the chair.
By the deputy chair, if it was the deputy chair?
Yes.
And by the chief casino officer if it was the chief casino officer?
Yes.
Now, obviously, at times, the deputy chair, the chief casino officer were the same
thing, yeah.
Same person. Okay, now, that general power that you've described of expedition, or to use it wisely, or however you want to characterise it, did you consider that applied also to the position of chief casino officer, or only chair and deputy chair?
Well, the difficulty was the fact that the chair the chair and the deputy chair and the chief casino officer were the same person. So I tended to think in terms of a person rather than the positions.
I see. So when the person occupying the position of deputy chair and chief casino officer is the same,
well, I didn't distinguish the roles from the person, I suppose.
okay, so you simply expected whoever the person was to exercise the power
Exercise
appropriately?
of power and report what
And
had been
report.
done, and then if there was any concerns about that, they'd be addressed.
Okay, I just want to take you to an example of what may have been an example of the exercise of the power in the way we've just described. If we could call up GWC .0004, .0008, .0004. You got a hard copy of that one? Can I provide you with a hard copy?
Thank you. Yeah.
And now, I really want to draw your attention to the second page. The question I have for you is whether you can recall having seen that document at or about the time it was, of its date, so in the early part of 2017.
Let's have a look. This was about the pre-shuffled cards, is it? Oh yes, pre-shuffle. I've lost it for a moment. Section 1. Absolute use of pre-shuffled angel cards. I do remember the discussion about this, and I certainly would have seen this document. I can't recall it in sort of
Sorry, I think
perfect detail from the time, but I remember the question of the cards. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I think you're looking at the wrong page.
Am I?
I want you to look at the page that's headed Instrument of Approval. I'll come back to the.
Oh, that one. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry,
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I can't say with certainty, but I'm pretty sure I would have seen it.
Okay. Now, do you recall generally the circumstances of the changes to the casino manual at this time?
Circumstances.
Do you remember this? Do you remember broadly speaking the changes taking place and what they were for?
Gaming equipment, international state gaming business, main bank. No, I don't. I'm afraid I can't say I do in detail.
Okay. So if I could ask you, to be for the agenda item for the May meeting, which is at GWC .0002, .0016, .0222 underscore 0093 to be brought up. Now, this is an agenda item for the May 2017 meeting.
Yeah.
If I could just draw to your attention the second table referring to delegations by the Chief Casino Officer,
Yes.
and really the second two items there.
The second item, did you say of that?
There's an item for section 19 and an item for section 03, capital A.
Oh, yes. So, oh, yeah, yeah.
And the details, you draw attention to the details.
New section. Yep.
And then I just next document. You might have to keep that.
All right.
You've got a copy of that one too. Sorry, I'm making you juggle so many documents, Mr. Clark.
No, that's all right.
Let me just put up the minutes of the meeting, which are at GWC .0002.0016.0220. At page 0004. Have you got a copy of the minutes there?
The minutes, yes.
So there is a question coming. I want you to
No, that's all right.
have a look at these things first.
I'm just wondering, have you got in the minutes, does it show that I attended that meeting? I probably did, but
This meeting, it does indicate you were there in May 2017, yes?
okay.
That's a page 0001 if it's there.
Right, okay.
Now, I appreciate this is 4 years ago, but do you have any recollection of that particular agenda item in the May meeting, which is the one referred to in the powers exercised in the delegation?
In terms of the actual content of what was delegated, or just...
As in terms of the power that was exercised under the power of delegation, in other words, the amendments to the casino manual.
Yeah. Well, I do remember the pre-shuffled cards thing for some reason, maybe because it's a strange thing. But I have to say it's vague, but I vaguely remember the third one, the switch to international interstate gaming business. There's something about making it broader than international to international interstate, something for some reason.
All right.
I'm sorry I can't provide more, but
That's okay. I just want to be sure. Do you have any recollection of any discussions at GWC meetings around this time of amendments to the casino manual dealing with junket operations?
I would say vaguely yes, because I do remember some consideration that it was something along the lines that people here in Perth and other parts of it should be allowed into the premium playing area rather than just sort of junkets. That sounds awfully vague and probably not quite right, but there was something about that I remember.
Do you recall whether this was an event where there was an application or a submission by the Perth Casino first to bring about a change to the manual?
I don't know. Sorry, I haven't been very helpful.
That's okay.
To you
It is, as I said earlier, it's 4 years ago. All right. Commissioners, I'm about to move to another topic. I have got a little bit of time to go.
All right.
It's really a matter for you whether you...
Mr. Duckworth, has it been raised with you that the prospect that we may ask you to come back tomorrow morning?
It has been raised. Yeah.
Thank you, and that's fine by you?
Yes, I guess so.
That was probably very unhappily phrased. Could I ask a question before we go? I'm sorry to do this to everybody, because I'm not sure that I've understood the witness's evidence on this point about delegation. Can I ask you, just to make sure that I've understood what your evidence is? From time to time, the Gaming and Wagering Commission would issue an instrument of delegation to particular officers or officers to allow them to exercise powers under delegation.
Yes.
Now, is it your evidence that in the great majority of cases, those officers did not actually exercise the delegated power without prior approval of the particular incident from the Gaming and Wagering Commission?
Yes, at least in a lot of them, yes, because there was discussion and then it was the delegation took place after that.
So, just so that I'm clear, that it wasn't a case of a monthly report coming to the commission of the various exercises of delegated power. Maybe there was discussion, but they were there to be noted by the commission. It was that before those powers were exercised, the commission had given approval. Is that your evidence?
It wouldn't be in every case, no. There would be, certainly all the delegations came to the meeting via the agenda, and there may be some that hadn't been discussed. It might be something like an extension to a two-up game in somewhere was granted on the grounds of such and such. So we'd know what had happened, and the premise was it would be very unlikely that there would have been much debate or discussion.
I thought I heard you say that it was only on rare occasions that the power was exercised, and then after the event, the commission was, and you gave an example of something, the name Barry Sargent came up. I just want to make sure that is your evidence.
Yes, in the majority of cases, there was discussion about whatever was delegated.
Before the power was exercised by the delegate?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. We will resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, can I just ask one follow-up question to that? Can you recall any occasion upon which there was an amendment made to the casino manual without prior approval from the GWC, and it was brought to the attention of the GWC afterwards?
No, I can't.
Thank you. We'll resume at 10 a.m.